All right, today we're going to talk about something pretty radical, a movement in project management that's been shaking things up. It's called #NoEstimates. And yeah, it's an idea that goes right after one of the most fundamental things we do in our jobs. So let's get into why it's gaining so much steam and challenging, decades of how we've been taught to work.
I mean, seriously, what if I told you that? What if every single hour your team is spent debating story points? Every late night you've spent trying to guess how long something will take? What if it was all just a complete waste of time? A part of a game you can't actually win? It's a pretty wild question, and it's right at the heart of this whole #NoEstimates idea.
And that brings us to the core belief right here. The folks behind this movement argue that estimation isn't just a little inaccurate. They believe it's actively harmful. So harmful, in fact, that we should just stop doing it altogether. Now, I know what you're thinking. That sounds like total chaos, right? But the goal isn't to just throw planning out the window. It's about making a huge shift away from guessing and towards measuring what's really happening.
So why such an extreme take? Well, the argument is pretty simple. When it comes to building new, complex software, we are just fundamentally terrible at guessing how long it will take. Think about it. Almost everything we build is unique. It's full of unknown problems. Trying to put a number on that, it's like trying to predict the exact weather, down to the minute, a month from now. It's just not going to happen. It's pure guesswork.
And this right here, this quote, absolutely nails where that guesswork turns toxic. A developer gives a rough, finger-in-the-air number, a guess with a ton of uncertainty. But that's not what's heard. It's heard as a promise, a rock-solid commitment. And suddenly, that guess becomes a deadline, a stick to beat the team with. It just sets everyone up to fail from day one.
And the fallout from that? Oh, it's brutal. To hit these impossible deadlines, developers get burned out. Or they have to cut corners, shipping shoddy code and racking up technical debt that's going to bite you later. Your planning meetings become these endless, pointless arguments about abstract numbers. So what happens? Developers start padding their estimates just to survive, which erodes trust. It just creates this spiral of friction and distrust between everybody.
Okay, so if that's the problem, what's the solution? Well, there is a way out of this trap. And the #NoEstimates philosophy offers a really powerful but simple alternative. Just stop guessing and start measuring. Let's see how that actually works.
So this isn't about chaos. It's actually a super disciplined three-step process. First, you slice. You don't size. Then you measure your actual flow. And finally, you use all that real data to forecast, not estimate. Let's dig into each one of these. Step 1 is probably the biggest mind shift of all. And this analogy is just perfect. Think about the old way. Your team stands around arguing about how heavy these giant, unique boulders are. It's slow, it's inaccurate. The new way? Forget weighing them. Your only job is to break those boulders down into small, similar-sized stones. Once they're all about the same size, well, you don't have to weigh them anymore, do you? You just count them.
And that one simple change, it completely transforms the conversation. You're not arguing anymore if a task is a 3-pointer or a 5-pointer. Who cares? The only question that matters now is this thing small enough for us to just start working on it? And if the answer is no, you just slice it again until it is. Simple as that.
So that brings us to step 2. Once you have this nice, steady stream of small stones coming through your system, you can stop telling fortunes and start collecting facts. You don't have to guess anymore. You can just measure. You can look at your team's actual, real-life performance. And to do that, you track a couple of key things. The first is cycle time. This is super simple. For every one of those little stones that you finish, you just record how long it took from the second you started it to the second it was done. This isn't a guess, it's a historical fact.
The other key number is throughput. Again, dead simple. It's just the count of how many work items, how many of those stones your team gets done in a week or a sprint or whatever. This becomes your team's real, proven capacity. Not some made-up velocity number based on abstract points. This is what you actually do.
And when you combine all that data, well, that leads to step 3. And this is where the real magic happens. Once you have a history of your actual cycle time and throughput, you can stop estimating completely, and you can start forecasting.
So now, when someone from the business asks that question, when will it be done? You don't give them a single, fragile date that everyone knows is probably wrong. Instead, you give them something way more powerful, a forecast based on real data, showing a range of possible dates and, this is the key part, the probability of hitting each one.
And here's what that actually looks like. You can use a really simple statistical model, it's often called a Monte Carlo simulation, that just runs thousands of what-if scenarios based on your team's actual past performance. And you can say with real confidence, look, based on our data, there's an 85% chance we'll finish these 50 items by October 15th. If you need more certainty, there's a 95% chance we'll be done by October 28th. See what just happened? You changed the conversation from a fake promise to a real business decision about risk.
Of course, right about now, you're probably thinking, okay, this sounds great in theory, but what about the real world? This definitely brings up some fair and pretty tough questions that we got to address.
And yeah, this is the big one. This is the question everybody asks first. How can you forecast anything if you're a brand new team? If you don't have any data, the business needs a number to get the budget, right? It's a totally valid point.
And the answer is to invest in learning, not in guessing. You run what's called a spike. You take a short amount of time, say a week or two, and you don't try to build the whole project. You just build one tiny little slice of it, from end to end. The point isn't the feature itself. The point is to get real data. After that spike, you have some actual throughput numbers, you know more about the complexity, and everyone can make a decision based on reality, not on some wild guess made up in a meeting room.
And I think this quote just hits the nail on the head. This whole movement isn't about being against planning. It's about being anti-waste. It's against wasting all the time, all the energy, all the team morale that gets burned up in the traditional toxic game of estimation.
So let's just boil this whole revolution down. It's really just a series of powerful shifts in thinking. It's a shift from arguing about size to getting good at slicing. It's a shift from guessing to actually measuring, from providing fragile estimates to delivering robust forecasts. And maybe the biggest shift of all, it's moving away from making a false promise and towards achieving real, honest-to-goodness predictability.
So at the end of the day, it leaves us with a pretty fundamental question. We've gone through a pretty deep topic that challenges things we've been doing for a very long time. So what do you think? Is #NoEstimates a brilliant revolution that can finally fix a broken system? Or is it just an impractical fantasy that could never work in the real world of hard deadlines and tight budgets? It's a huge debate, and definitely one worth having. Thanks for joining me on The Explainer.